The last night on Earth, John never thought a simple goodnight kiss could change his whole life. It was late, the streets outside were quiet, and his small apartment felt warm and safe. He had just finished packing for his business trip. The next morning, the suitcase sat near the door, ready for the early taxi. All that was left was to call his girlfriend Anna and say goodnight. They spoke for a while, laughing, talking about silly things, and then she whispered softly, "Good night, John. I wish I could give you a real kiss right now." He smiled and said, "Me too." Not knowing those words would be the last normal thing he would ever say on Earth, he turned off the lights, lay in bed, and closed his eyes. The sound of the city faded into the soft hum of his apartment's heater. Sleep came quickly, warm and heavy. But then something strange happened. In his dream, or what he thought was a dream, he felt lips pressed gently against his. They were warm, unfamiliar, and carried a strange sweetness. When he opened his eyes, there was no one in the room, but the air shimmered faintly. Like heat above a road in summer, a soft, musical voice whispered in his ear, though he couldn't see anyone. "Chosen. Bound." "Ours," it said, and the words sank deep into his mind. John sat up, heart racing. He grabbed his phone to 47 a.m. Everything looked normal, but the room felt wrong. The air smelled different. Instead of the faint scent of coffee from the kitchen, there was a soft floral fragrance. He rubbed his eyes, thinking maybe he was still half asleep. Then he noticed the walls were no longer his apartment walls. The bed beneath him was not his bed, and the light streaming in from the window was pale blue. He rushed to the window and froze. Outside, 2 moons hung in the sky. The land was covered in glowing plants, their leaves swaying without wind. Strange shapes moved in the distance, too tall, too thin to be human. His breathing quickened, his heart pounding in his chest. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't Earth. The door to the room slid open without a sound. 3 figures stepped inside. They were tall, graceful, with skin that shimmered faintly like pearl. Their eyes were large and bright, their hair flowing like liquid silver. They wore long robes of white and blue, with patterns that shifted like water. The tallest of them stepped forward, her gaze locking on John. "Human," she said in perfect English, though her voice had a melody to it. "Welcome." John stepped back, pressing himself against the wall. "Where am I? Who are you?" The woman smiled, though there was something in her eyes he couldn't read. "You are on Varelia, a world far from your own," she said. "You were brought here by the binding kiss, a sacred act of our people." John's head spun. "The what? I didn't agree to this. Send me back." The other 2 women glanced at each other, whispering in a language he didn't understand. The tall woman stepped closer, and for a moment, John thought she might touch him. Instead, she said something that sent a chill down his spine. "You are now bound to our princess, and she carries the right to your child." John shook his head. No, that's insane. "I'm not." This isn't." Before he could finish, the door slid open again. Another figure entered, smaller, delicate, wearing a silver crown that glinted in the blue light. Her eyes were deep violet, her skin pale gold, and her hair fell in waves down her back. She looked at John like she had known him forever. "Do not be afraid," she said softly. "You are safe here with me." John backed away, his mind racing. The princess stepped closer, her gaze steady. "You were chosen," she whispered, "and now you belong to my people." To me, John felt trapped. Everything in him screamed to run, to fight, to find a way back to Earth. But a small part of him, confused and overwhelmed, couldn't stop looking into her eyes. There was something there, something that felt almost human. Still, he clenched his fists. "I don't belong here," he said firmly. "And I'm not staying." The princess tilted her head slightly, as if studying him. Then she smiled faintly. "You will," she whispered. In time, you will. Outside, the strange glowing plants swayed again, though there was no wind. Somewhere far away, a low, deep sound echoed like a horn calling through the night. The three attendants stepped forward. Bowing to the princess, the tall woman spoke again. "It begins tonight, Your Highness." The princess looked at John, her expression unreadable. "Rest now, John," she said. "Tomorrow, you will understand." Before he could protest. The lights in the room dimmed to darkness, the door slid shut, and John was left staring at the two moons outside, not knowing if he would ever see Earth again. John woke up to the sound of soft voices. The room was brighter now, with pale light. Flooding in from the tall window, he sat up quickly. Remembering the strange events from the night before, 2 moons, glowing plants, alien women, and the princess with violet eyes. It hadn't been a dream. He was still here, far from Earth. The silver door slid open, and the tall woman from before stepped inside. Her long robe trailed behind her as she moved. "The princess wishes to see you," she said in a calm voice. John hesitated, but his curiosity pushed him to stand. He followed her into a long hallway made of smooth, crystal-like walls. The air was warm and carried the scent of flowers. Strange murals covered the walls, showing alien figures holding hands with humans. John felt a chill. It was as if they had expected him long before he arrived. They entered a grand chamber. The ceiling was high, decorated with strands of glowing vines. The princess sat on a raised platform, wearing a flowing white dress with silver patterns. Her crown gleamed in the light, and her violet eyes watched him closely. John stayed near the doorway, keeping his distance. "You brought me here without my permission," he said, his voice sharp. "Why?" The princess stood, walking toward him slowly. Her steps were graceful, her expression unreadable. "My people are dying," she said. "We cannot survive without new life." John frowned. "And you think? I'm here too." "What? Start a family? With you?" She nodded once, calm and certain. "You were chosen by the binding kiss," she said. "That makes you my mate by our ancient law." John almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You can't just decide something like that." Her gaze didn't waver. "It is not a decision, John," she said softly. "It is destiny." The words made him uneasy. Destiny was something he had never believed in, but here, in this strange world, everything felt twisted. The princess gestured for him to sit on a low bench. He refused, standing with his arms crossed. "I want to go home," he said. "Right now." The princess sighed, a faint sadness in her eyes. "You cannot," she said. "The binding cannot be undone." John shook his head. "There's always a way," he muttered. But deep down, he felt the heavy truth in her words, the strange kiss, the sudden transportation, the connection he felt when looking at Hernan of it, felt like something he could break easily. 2 attendants entered, carrying a tray of food. The dishes were filled with glowing fruits, steaming breads, and crystal cups of shimmering liquid. John's stomach growled, despite his anger. The princess noticed and gave a small smile. "Eat," she said gently. "You will need your strength." He didn't move, still watching her with suspicion. "What do you mean by that?" he asked. She tilted her head slightly. "Because soon others will come to claim you," she said, "and I will have to protect you." The words hit him like ice. "Others?" he asked, his voice low. The princess nodded. "They're our rival. Clans who would take you and use you for their own survival." She explained, "You are the first human to arrive here in many generations, John, and your presence will cause a storm." He stared at her, trying to understand how his life had gone from a simple goodnight call to being the center of some alien power struggle. The princess stepped closer, her voice dropping. "You may not trust me yet, But if you want to stay alive, you must stay. Close to me, her words carried weight, and John knew she wasn't exaggerating. Still, the thought of being hers made him uneasy. He took a deep breath. "I'm not yours," he said firmly. She didn't argue, but her small smile returned. "Not yet," she whispered. "But you will be." Before John could answer, a loud sound shook the chamber. It was like a deep horn, followed by a sharp ringing. The attendants looked at each. Uther in alarm, the tall woman rushed in, her face tense. "Your Highness, they are here," she said urgently. The princess's eyes darkened. "John," she said, turning to him. "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." The door to the chamber slid open with force. Figures in dark armor entered, their faces hidden by smooth masks. They carried long, spear-like weapons that hummed with energy. One of them pointed at John. "The human is ours," the figure said in a low, mechanical voice. John felt his chest tighten. The princess stepped in front of him, her robe flowing like water. "No," she said firmly, her voice echoing in the chamber. "He belongs to me." The armored figures moved forward. John's heart pounded. He didn't know who to fear more, the ones trying to take him, or the princess who claimed to own him. But one thing was certain. His fate on this alien planet was no longer just a strange mystery. It had just become dangerous. The moment the armored figures stepped closer, John's instincts screamed at him to run. He didn't know the rules of this alien world. But he understood one thing. He was the prize, and everyone in that room wanted to claim him. The princess stood firm, blocking the intruders with her body. Her voice was steady, but her hand rested on a curved blade at her waist. "You will not take him," she said, each word sharp and dangerous. The leader of the armored figures tilted his head. "You cannot stop us, princess," he said, in that strange mechanical tone. "We have more men waiting outside." John's heart pounded. This was his chance, if they were focused on each other. Maybe he could slip away. Slowly, he took a step. Back then, another. No one seemed to notice as the princess and the leader argued. The sound of their voices filled the air. John's eyes darted to the side of the chamber where a narrow archway led into a dark corridor. Without thinking, he turned and slipped through it. His footsteps were silent against the smooth floor. The corridor twisted and turned. The walls glowed faintly, lighting his path. Strange shadows danced along the edges. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew he had to get as far from that chamber as possible. He passed a tall window and caught sight of the alien city. Buildings of crystal rose high into the sky, connected by glowing bridges. In the distance, the two moons shone down. On streets filled with moving figures, it was beautiful and terrifying. John spotted a staircase and hurried down. The air grew cooler the lower he went. He heard faint voices in the distance, speaking in the alien language. He stayed close to the wall, moving quietly. The stairs ended at a wide doorway that opened into a garden. But this was no earth garden. The plants glowed softly, their petals moving as if breathing. Some had long, vine-like arms that shifted. When he passed, he kept going, moving deeper until the palace walls were far behind him. For a brief moment, he thought he was free. But then a sound stopped him. A low growl came from the shadows ahead. A creature stepped out, its body long and lean with scales that shimmered in the moonlight. Its eyes glowed bright green, locking onto him. John froze, his mind racing. He looked around for a weapon. All he found was a long, heavy branch that had fallen from one of the glowing trees. He grabbed it, holding it like a bat. The creature circled him, its tail swaying slowly. Then it lunged. John swung the branch with all his strength. It hit the creature's side with a crack. The beast hissed and backed away, but before it could strike again, another figure appeared, the princess. She moved like a flash of light, her curved blade slicing through the air. The creature let out a sharp cry and vanished into the dark. John's chest rose and fell as he tried to catch his breath. She sheathed her blade and turned to him. "You think you can survive here alone?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with anger. John glared at her. "I didn't ask to be here," he said. "I just want to go home." She stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "You run, and others will take you," she said, "and they will not treat you as I do." He didn't reply. Her words unsettled him because part of him believed she might be telling the truth. They walked back toward the palace in silence. The garden glowed around them. John noticed strange symbols carved into the stones along the path. They looked like stories, showing humans standing beside alien figures in battle. He wondered how many others had been brought here before him, and what had happened to them when they reached the palace. The tall woman from before was waiting. At the entrance, she gave the princess a questioning look. He tried to run. The princess said simply. The tall woman's gaze shifted to John. "You are lucky she found you," she said. "The jungle is not kind to the unclaimed." John clenched his jaw at the word unclaimed. He hated it. He wasn't a thing to be owned. But here, it seemed, that was exactly how they saw him. Back in the chamber, the armored intruders were gone. The princess sat down, motioning for John to sit as well. He stayed standing. She studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You will not survive here without me," she said. Her tone wasn't a threat. It was a fact. John crossed his arms. "Then maybe you should send me back," he said. Her eyes softened. "I can't," she said quietly, "but I can keep you alive." John didn't trust her, but as he remembered the creature's glowing green eyes in the dark, he knew one thing. For now, he might have no choice but to stay close to her. Asterisk that night, John sat in a quiet corner of the princess's chamber. He refused the soft bed they offered him, choosing instead to sit against the cold wall. He didn't want to feel like he belonged here, but the strange events of the day kept replaying in his head: the armored intruders, the glowing jungle, and the creature that almost killed him. He had to admit it. Without the princess, he'd probably be dead already. The princess sat nearby, her long silver hair falling over her shoulder as she carefully cleaned her blade. She glanced at him from time to time but didn't speak. The silence between them was heavy. Finally, she broke it. "You fought well against the jungle beast," she said, her voice calm. John gave a short laugh. "If you call swinging a stick fighting well." Her lips curved into the smallest smile. "Most humans I've met would have frozen." She said, "You did not." John didn't respond. Instead, he watched her hands. They were steady. Practiced the hands of someone who had fought many battles, but there was a gentleness in the way she set the blade down. It didn't match the image he had of her as a cold alien ruler. After a while, she poured a glowing blue liquid into 2 small cups. She offered one to him. "It will help you sleep," she said. John hesitated, then took it. It was warm, with a taste like sweet fruit mixed with mint as the night deepened. The faint hum of the palace walls seemed to grow softer. Outside, the 2 moons bathed the city in silver light. John found himself speaking without thinking. "I had a life back. Home," he said quietly. "A job, friends. Someone I cared about." The princess listened without interrupting. When he stopped, she said, "I had a life too, before my people began dying." Her voice was softer now, almost fragile. "I was not meant to rule so soon, but our survival demanded it for the first time." John saw something different in her. Not a ruler, not a warrior, but someone carrying a burden too heavy for one person. He didn't know why, but it made his anger fade a little. Still, he kept his guard up. "Why me?" he asked. "Why not someone from your own people?" She looked at him steadily. "Because none of them can give us what we need," she said. "Our bodies are failing." We cannot create life without you. John leaned back against the wall, staring at the floor. Her words made him uneasy. It wasn't just about being stuck here anymore. It was about being the key to their survival. He didn't want that kind of responsibility, but deep inside, he knew running wouldn't solve it. Later, when the palace grew quiet, she stood and walked toward the balcony. John followed her, curious. The view was breathtaking. The glowing city stretched far into the horizon, with crystal towers reflecting the moonlight. Below, the streets were filled with small lights. Moving like fireflies, it's beautiful, John said before he could stop himself. The princess glanced at him, her eyes softening. It is, she agreed, and I would see it live on. With you by my side, he shook his head. I'm not your savior. He said, maybe not, she replied. But you are here now, and that means something. Her words stayed with him long after they left the balcony. The next morning, John woke to the sound of soft knocking. An attendant entered, bringing food and a folded piece of cloth. The princess explained it was clothing made for him. It was light but strong, with a pattern like flowing water. John didn't want to admit it, but it was comfortable. When he stepped out into the hall, he caught the princess watching him with a faint smile. You look less like a prisoner now, she said. Still feels like one, he replied. They spent the day walking through the palace gardens. She showed him strange plants that could heal wounds, flowers that sang when touched, and ponds with water that glowed at night. John found himself asking questions without realizing it, and she answered them all, patiently. For the first time since he arrived, the fear in his chest began to loosen. It didn't mean he trusted her completely, but something was changing as the sunless sky shifted from pale blue to deep purple. The princess led him to a quiet courtyard. There was no one else there, just the sound of water trickling from a crystal fountain. This is where I come when I need peace, she said. John sat on the edge of the fountain, listening. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It felt calm. And strangely, he didn't want to leave. The peace of the quiet courtyard did not last long. It was just after dusk when the first warning horn echoed through the palace. The sound was deep and urgent, vibrating in John's chest. He stood up quickly, looking toward the princess. Her face had already hardened, her hand going to the curved blade at her side. They found us, she said, her voice low but steady. Before John could ask who she meant, shouts erupted from the outer walls. The sky above the city flashed with sudden bursts of light. From the balcony, John saw dark shapes swooping in from the horizon. They were not ships, but living creatures. Massive winged beasts carrying armored riders. The riders' weapons glowed red. Leaving trails of fire in the air, the princess turned to him sharply. Stay close, she ordered. If they reach you, it will not keep you alive. The palace corridors filled with the sound of rushing feet. Guards in silver armor moved past them, shouting in the alien language. John tried to keep up as the princess led him toward the inner hall. Suddenly, an explosion shook the ground beneath them. Shards of glowing crystal fell from the ceiling, narrowly missing his head. The princess grabbed his arm and pulled him forward. They burst into a grand chamber where a group of warriors was waiting. One of them, a tall man with deep blue skin, spoke urgently to the princess. John couldn't understand the words, but he understood the fear in their eyes. The princess turned to him. They've breached the gates, she said. We must move you to the inner sanctum. John shook his head. No, if they want me, hiding won't stop them. She stared at him for a moment, surprised. Then stay near me, she said firmly, and do exactly as I tell you. Before they could move again, the doors to the chamber burst open. 3 enemy warriors charged in, their armor black and jagged. They carried weapons shaped like long spears, crackling with energy. The princess moved fast, her blade flashing in the moonlight. She struck the first attacker in a single motion, sending him sprawling. The other two closed in, one swinging at John. Instinct took over. John grabbed a fallen spear and blocked the strike. The shock ran through his arms, but he held his ground. The princess finished the second attacker with a precise cut, then turned to help him. Together, they forced the last enemy back toward the doorway. The guards rushed in to finish the fight. The princess looked at John, breathing hard. "You fight better than I expected," she said. John smirked despite the fear pounding in his chest. "Guess I'm full of surprises." There was no time for more words. Another explosion rocked the palace. This one much closer. A guard shouted something urgent, and the princess's eyes widened. "They've breached the inner wall," she said. "They're coming straight for us." John tightened his grip on the spear. "Then we'd better move." They ran through a narrow side passage, the walls glowing faintly with every step. The sound of battle echoed behind them, metal clashing, shouts, and the roar of the winged beasts above. At the end of the passage, they entered a high tower with open archways. From here, John could see the chaos in the streets below. Fires burned among the crystal buildings, and the glowing plants had turned red, reacting to the violence. Dark shapes moved quickly between the rooftops, searching. And then he saw it, a group of black-armored riders heading straight toward the tower. "They're coming here," John said, pointing. The princess glanced at them, then at him. "They know you're inside," she said. "We can't outrun them from here." She reached into a small pouch at her belt and pulled out a tiny glowing sphere. "When I break this, it will release a light they cannot follow," she explained, "but it will not last." Long John nodded, understanding. "Then we run the moment you use it." The riders drew closer, their beasts letting out piercing cries. The princess crushed the sphere in her hand, and a brilliant flash filled the tower. The air shimmered, and the noise outside grew muffled. "Go!" she shouted, pulling him toward a narrow bridge that led away from the tower. They ran, their footsteps echoing, the bridge swaying beneath them. Behind them, the light began to fade, and the cries of the beasts grew louder again. They reached the far side of the bridge and ducked into another passage. Only when they were deep inside the palace again did they stop to catch their breath. John leaned against the wall, his chest heaving. "That was close," he said. The princess nodded, her face still tense. "It's not over," she said. "They will come again, and they will not stop until they have you." John met her gaze. "Then I guess I'll have to stay alive, just to make sure." "They don't win," he said, for the first time. The princess gave him a smile that wasn't guarded, spoken like someone who belongs here. She said. John didn't answer, but deep inside, he wondered if she might be right. The night after the attack, the palace felt different. The glowing walls still shimmered softly, but the air carried a tense weight. John could hear the distant sounds of repairs, stone being shifted, guards shouting orders. He sat alone in a corner room, staring at the two moons outside. He knew the enemy would come again, and this time they might succeed. The princess entered quietly, her silver hair tied back, her robe marked with dust from the battle. "You should rest," she said, her voice calm but tired. John shook his head. "Not when people are risking their lives because of me." She walked closer, stopping only a few feet away. "They're not risking their lives for you," she said softly. "They're risking them for our future." John looked at her, unsure if he wanted to hear more. She took a slow breath. "My council met tonight," she said. "They have given me two choices: send you to the mountains, where you will be hidden until the war ends, or keep you here under my protection." John frowned. "And which one do you want?" Her eyes met his, steady and unblinking. "I want you to stay," she said, "because if you leave my side, they will find you, and you will die." He leaned back in his chair, thinking, hiding sounded safe. But it also sounded like a trap, waiting alone while the war raged outside. Staying meant danger, but it also meant knowing what was happening. Having some control, he wasn't sure which was worse. "You make it sound like I'm important to your people," he said. "You are," she replied without hesitation. "More than you know." Before John could answer, the tall woman from the first night entered the room. Her expression was serious. "Scouts report movement near the southern border," she said in the alien tongue. The princess nodded, replying quickly. John didn't understand the words, but the tension in their voices told him enough. The enemy was moving again. When the tall woman left, the princess turned back to him. "Decide now," she said. "Do you want to hide, or do you want to stay with me?" John stood, walking to the window. The glowing city stretched before him, beautiful but fragile. He thought about the creature in the jungle, the battle in the tower, the way the princess had stood in front of him without fear. Every part of him wanted to go home, but home felt impossibly far now. If he hid, he would always wonder what happened to her. And if she had survived, he turned back to her. "I'll stay," he said. The princess's eyes softened, but her voice remained steady. "Then you must accept what that means," she said. "You will fight beside us, and you will be claimed as mine in front of the council." John raised an eyebrow. "Claimed? It will make it harder for others to challenge my right to protect you," she explained. He wasn't sure if he liked the sound of that, but he nodded anyway. "If it keeps me alive, fine." The next morning, the great hall was filled with the council members. They sat in a half circle, their robes flowing like waves, their faces unreadable. The princess stood beside John, her hand resting lightly on the hilt of her blade. She spoke in the alien language, her voice strong. When she finished, every eye in the room turned to him. He didn't understand their words, but he understood the weight of their gaze. The eldest council member spoke, her voice low and measured. The princess translated, "They ask if you are willing to stand as my mate, to live under my protection, and to give our people a chance to survive." John's heart pounded. It wasn't just a political statement, it was a vow. He looked at the princess, then at the council. "Yes," he said simply. A ripple of sound moved through the hall. Some faces showed relief, others suspicion. The eldest council member stood, raising her hand. "It is decided," the princess translated. "From this moment, you are bound to me by law." As they left the hall, John felt the weight of his decision settle on his shoulders. It wasn't love, it wasn't even trust, but it was a choice. And for the first time since he arrived, he felt like he had taken control of something. The princess glanced at him as they walked. "You have made enemies today," she said, "but you have also made allies." John gave a small, grim smile. "Guess I'd better make sure I survive long enough to meet them." Weeks passed since the council declared John as the princess's mate. The city was still on edge, but the people had started to look at him differently. At first, their stares were filled with suspicion and fear. Now, some nodded in greeting, and a few even smiled. John still felt like a stranger in their world. But he was no longer just the human, he was something more. Even if he didn't fully understand it yet, the princess trained with him every morning. She taught him how to use the curved blades of her people, how to move quickly on the glowing bridges, and how to read the patterns of the night sky. John learned faster than he expected. Maybe it was survival instinct. Maybe it was the quiet determination in the princess's eyes. Whatever it was, he no longer felt helpless. One evening, they stood on the palace balcony, the twin moons reflected in the crystal streets below. The princess placed a hand on her stomach, almost without thinking. John noticed and frowned. "You're still sure?" he asked quietly. She looked at him, her violet eyes steady. "Yes," she said. "The binding kiss has already done its work." The words hit him like a wave. Somewhere deep inside, he knew it was true. The idea of becoming a father, not just on another world, but to a child who would belong to two species, was something he couldn't have imagined weeks ago, before he could reply. A horn sounded in the distance, but this time it wasn't an alarm. The princess's face softened. "It's over," she said. "The enemy has withdrawn." For now, relief washed over John. The city would finally know peace, even if it was only temporary. The next day, the streets were filled with music and light. People danced under the glow of the moons. Strangers came forward to thank him, calling him by a new name in their language. The princess translated with a small smile. "They call you father of two worlds," she said. John laughed softly, shaking his head. "I'm not even sure I'm ready to be a father of one." "But you are," she replied, "because you already fight for more than yourself." Later that night, the princess led him to a quiet hill outside the palace. From there, the whole city stretched before them, the glowing towers, the crystal bridges, the silver rivers, all of it seemed alive. "This is what you've saved," she said softly. John looked out at the view. "I didn't save it alone," he said. "You did too." She shook her head. "Without you, there would be no future for my people." They stood in silence for a long time. The night was cool, and a soft wind carried the scent of the flowering trees. John realized he no longer thought about escaping every second of the day. Earth felt far away now, like a dream fading in. The morning light, this place, strange and dangerous as it was, had become real to him. And the princess, once just his captor, had become something much more. When they returned to the palace, the council was waiting. They had gathered to mark the official start of a new alliance. The eldest council member placed a silver band on John's wrist. "It is a mark of belonging," the princess explained. "From now on, you are part of our people." John stared at the band, feeling the weight of the moment. He had come here against his will, but now he was choosing to stay. That night, as they stood together on the balcony once more, the princess looked at him and said, "From this moment, your life is no longer just your own." John nodded. "I know," he said, "and I'm okay with that." She smiled, her hand brushing against his. "For our child, for our people, for both our worlds," she whispered. John looked out at the glowing city, feeling something he hadn't felt since the night he arrived. Not fear, not anger, but purpose. And for the first time, he truly believed the name they had given him, the father of two worlds.